Well, of course, there was a lot of disadvantaged people, I think, in Almont when we first came. You heard the story of the mills. There was the cutbacks and the unemployment, and the downtown looked very sad for a time. The hub couldn't have started without the Children's Hospital. There were 2 or 3 organisations in town. One woman said, we don't need another organisation because we have excellent organisations in town, but there were different needs for the new families, and so we looked around, and we started saving money, or not saving, making money for the Children's Hospital that was yet to be built. And we did all sorts of funny things. I'll confess this. Our first project was lemonade stand at the Gemmell Park, because there was a soccer tournament, a tournament of some kind, and I don't know how much we made, but that was the beginning of money being sent into the auxiliary in Ottawa.
In 1974, a group of us who were members of the Children's Hospital Auxiliary, raising funds for the Children's Hospital that was being built in Ottawa. In 1973 or 4, the hospital was built. And Julia Thomas was the ringleader for this, and her husband said to her, well, what are you going to do now? And so we got together. And at that time, I was involved with the Neighborhood Club. And the Neighborhood Club was a group of women from Irishtown.
There was a lot of people in town back years ago that lived on low income or just one income with big families. And a lot of times the mothers were in the home all the time and never got out or never had a chance to meet other people type thing, eh? So years ago we formed what we called the Neighborhood Club back then, where a group of low income women got together and met like once a month type thing. It was like a potluck. Everybody brought something, and we just started talking. We'd play cards or something after, just a night out to get away from your family for a wee while and meet other people. And when you start talking, you say, you know, geez, I'm going to have to go out and get a sofa for my young lad if he's outgrown his. Well, some lady would say, well, I have one at home that might fit yours, and I'll bring it over. And we start exchanging or bringing in things that our children had grown out of, and see something that somebody else's children had grown out of. So we exchange clothing. And I think that's originally how the hub got started. There was another group involved too, like the CHEO group, the girls. And we kind of got together and started saying, well, why can't we do this on a bigger scale? Or why can't we, make it bigger for not just with the one group?
Part of the reason the Neighborhood Club formed was there was a fire in Irishtown where 4 children died because there was no fire hydrants in Irishtown. There was no water service in Irishtown, water or sewage. And it was a huge controversy, and Reverend Hans Scodian took up the cause and took a lot of abuse from some people in town that these people, deserved whatever it was they had. They maybe lost their job because the mill was shutting down or whatever, but it was quite nasty. And I have the newspaper clippings somewhere. And so this Neighborhood Club was formed. Again, the United Church was a pretty activist church, and with the support of a woman named Gail Thompson, she helped these women meet on a regular basis, and they met at the church. And I knew that one of them operated a clothing exchange out of her home. People would drop clothes off, and she had them in her living room. And the women really wanted to rent a store, but nobody would rent a store because they didn't have the status. They weren't middle class. So when we were getting together and thinking about what we could do for our own community as opposed to raising funds for a children's hospital, I suggested a thrift shop.
Fern Martin and them ended up purchasing a building.
Cliff Graham had a drugstore on the main street of Almont, and he was willing to sell to us. He had it up for sale, and we debated about buying it with our baby bonuses. And I was a little uncertain about that, whether we could carry it. Hindsight, we could have. But at the time, I was a little uncertain, and Peter and I said we would buy the store and rent it to the group, and that's what we did. So we rented it for a low amount, and we opened that store in short order.
And we all got together and fixed it up and painted and remodeled and whatever and started the store.
Yeah, it was the Civichan that gave us $250 as a
to start.
startup for our first month's rent, and a little bit of cleaning and that's basically how. And they said it's never going to work with a bunch of
You'll
women.
never last a year in a town like this. That type of store will never last a year. And we're going on 41 years now. So obviously, and the more people come in and use the store, the
That's
facility, we had money left over, so let's help other people.
And we wanted it to be a women's center, and we wanted it to have provide services to drive people to the city who needed to go for medical appointments. And the other thing that we wanted was the local social services all took place out of Perth, and we suggested to them that we could provide an office for them in Almont. And that went over very well with them. It was a free office, and they could meet people in the town.
Downstairs was a dungeon, but all the stuff came in the back and downstairs. And then Nancy Hall and I and a few others went down there and we sorted it all out and then brought it up, and then there was a nice office there, a little office there with this lad. I can't remember what his name, but he came in and talked to a lot of people that needed direction about different things. That was sort of a free base for him, which was nice. And then at the back, we had the nice little social area where people would come in. Older people would come in, sit down, have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. And, we had a sink there. You could wash your hands, you could wash dishes up, that kind of thing.
The coffee corner just really, and then you got to know people more in town. You got to really know better who needed stuff and who needed appointments with these out-of-town social workers and things like that. Yeah, that was the big thing. That's definitely why we wanted a coffee corner.
The hub itself at that time was a hive of activity. It was fueled by the energy and the commitment and the righteous indignation of characters like Fern Martin and Julia Thomas. And Julia's like a force of nature. She would see an injustice in her New Zealand accent, say, "Oh, someone must do something about that." And we'd all agree, and off she'd go. And we would follow.
I moved to Almont with my husband in January of 2002. And the very first thing after we purchased our house was we spoke with the original owner, and she gave us a tour. And she told us not only about septic tanks and all the good stuff we had to learn about rural living, but she talked about the downtown core and how at that point it was just on the cusp of being sort of revitalized and coming back to life. But she said if there was one little gem that she could tell us about, it was the hub. And her advice was, because we worked during the day, we were typical Almont newbie commuters, she said you had to go on a Thursday night for the bag sale or go on a Saturday between 9 to 4. And she knew the hours off by heart. And I remember sitting there going, the hub, what's that, a restaurant, a bar? She said, no, it's a thrift store, but it had a purpose. And so lo and behold, one Saturday morning, Derek and I get up, we park at the library, we walk down the main street, we discover the hub, and we sort of went, oh my gosh, she was right. It's a gem just waiting to be discovered, and never looked back. Gosh, I shopped there pretty much consistently until I was pregnant. And then, of course, within that sort of year leading up to, having Duncan at that point, I shopped constantly for baby clothes and would come in on the Thursday night bag sales. And that's how I got roped in, is when I was pregnant. It was Vivian Pollock, Barb McGuinness, and Marge Sabrin. And those were the three that kept doing the arm twisting. Oh, it'd be great if you came to the potluck. You'll be able to get out after the baby's born. You should come and volunteer. And the more you hear that, the more you think, that's probably a good idea because I'm going to need a break. And after I had Duncan, he was born February 22nd, and by the beginning of March 2006, I was volunteering at the Hub twice a week. So it was my outlet to get away from the baby and have adult conversation. Yeah.
In 1976, in the winter, I was sitting at home, heavily pregnant, bored, really not knowing anyone, because in the first 3.5 years I lived here, my entire community was in the high school. Teaching, coaching, my colleagues, our social life was in the high school. And I didn't have the time or the opportunity to meet people from other walks of life in Almonte. So when I went on maternity leave a couple months before Dave was due, consequently, I didn't know anybody, and I'm sitting at home, happily doodling away. And a friend of mine called Enid Nightingale, whose husband, George, was also a teacher, arrived at the door and said, "You must get out. There's a wonderful place called the Hub with very interesting people. So get your coat on, and I'm going to take you there right now." And she did. And there were very interesting people there. People like Fern and Julia and June Campbell, Margare and Elaine and Tina Napier. And I discovered Almonte through the Hub.
Hi, I'm Due Roeder, and I am 34 years old, and I've been going to the Hub for at least a decade now. It was sort of my introduction to the community, and that and the library have been my main connections to this whole area, really, because I've been sick since we've moved here and haven't made a lot of other connections. And so everybody there has been so warm and welcoming, and I can actually afford to shop. And it was sort of my main sort of entertainment, and I get all my presents to give to people away there. And it's been really wonderful.
My name is Eloise Caverson. My husband retired from the Army in the early 90s. We moved to Almonte about 1995. I met Julia Thomas, and she took me down to the Hub and said, "You'll meet wonderful people here," and I did. So there we are.
I was introduced to the Hub through a friend who invited me to come to a Christmas potluck. The Hub potlucks are famous because it's just groaning boards of marvelous food. And this meeting was held at the home of Julia Thomas, who was one of the founders of the Hub. I had never been in a room with so much vitality, energy, and power as the room full of those women, and I knew immediately I had to belong with that group, and I have never regretted a minute of it.
Oh, well, my name is Myrtle Crawford. I've lived in Almonte all my life except for 25 years when I was out on a farm on the Dwyer Hill Road. When we retired from the farm, we moved to Almonte, and I worked in Digital for 17 years. I retired from Digital in '86, and then I was looking for something to do. And my best friend, Millie Monroe, was at the Hub, so she asked me to help her. So I went to help her at the Hub on Monday afternoons, and I was there for the next 20 years.
Hello, my name is Kevin Finner. I'm a resident of Almonte. Been a resident of here since 1968. Been a goer to the Hub, a Hub user for at least half of that time. Started going to the hub originally when it was on the main street of Almonte years and years ago. Went there as a younger man to buy work clothes, and sort of got into the habit of buying inexpensive clothing for working, things that you didn't have to be very careful with. And I was a mechanic, so you go through a lot of older clothes.
My name is Judy Lawton. I am the volunteer manager for both Rebound and the Hub, or under the Almonte Community Coordinators. I have been with this organisation for almost 4 years, and I was introduced by Julia Thomas, who you've probably met and everybody knows, for one of the founding members. And I was new to the area, and I found it such a fantastic organisation. Amazing ladies, an amazing organisation. So, I started out as assistant manager with Maria Murphy, and now I've progressed to manager for a 3-year term.
In October of 2008, I started working as a sorter. I got hired as a sorter. So in addition to volunteer roles, I was a paid employee. And that totally changed my life. I started sitting on the board.
I started out as just a Monday sorter and went to my first hub potluck, and they were selecting officers for the board for the next year, and they couldn't get anybody to be the volunteer coordinator. And I thought, oh, come on, how hard can it be? I'll do it. And did that, I think, for about 3 years. Had a wonderful time. Knew all the staff in the store and just really enjoyed doing that. And then it was, well, how about president? We have nobody to be president. Oh, well, I guess I can do that. So I did that for another 3 years.
One day in probably the fall of 2004, I got a call from Eloise Caverson, who was the president, and she said, "We have a problem, and you can solve it." And I said, "Oh, yes? How?" She said, "We need a past president, and you were a president." And when I stopped laughing, because yes, I had been a president, but 20 years before, I said yes. And that started my second chapter in the hub. And my role is mostly being in organization and administration.
And there's got to be a ton of that.
There is a lot of it. People don't realize it's a large organization. It's got a 6-digit income. It runs 2 stores. There are 65 active volunteers. There are 14 part-time staff. There's payroll to be done, etc., etc., etc. Policy, CRA regulations to follow, a building to run.
Just we both sorted.
Yes. In the early years, we hid in the basement and sorted.
Yeah. We did a lot of.
We did all the sorting and the garbage and boxing of stuff then.
Never on it as an executive position.
I have been since we had the new store, as everyone should know by now or will know that the first store burnt twice, and then we ended up at the bank. That's another whole story. But I was the store manager for 3 years when we first opened the new store, and now I am head of the building committee. So I oversee all the maintenance and anything to do with the building.
Right, when I got really sick and it wasn't looking like I was going to make it, and we had been in Southern Ontario for a long time and funds were getting very, very low, the Hub decided to support us, and I didn't know how the decision was made. I just heard they'd done it, and it was just, really, really nice feeling to know that they were still thinking of us and they were trying to support us, and it was really, really kind of them. So wonderful and so warm and just welcoming, and
They're also caring.
Yeah, everybody there is really caring. Yeah.
I like the people I've met. I enjoy my time on Mondays. Gives me a little start to my week. This is what I do on Monday. I enjoy the satisfaction of what the Hub does for the community. And I'm retired. What else am I going to do?
And yet we get the most heartwarming letters from people that we've helped. So you know that they are, the people that we've had to help are no different than we are. We're all this close to being where they are. And I think that's what keeps us all together.
First of all, I think I found my self-esteem. And having been a nurse and having self-esteem, and then becoming a wife and mother, you sort of went lower down the totem pole a wee bit.
There is a great deal of satisfaction in what we do, and knowing that we make a difference in the community. But you can't forget that there is and has been a great deal of fun, a great deal of laughter, a lot of great food involved in the last 40 years.
It is definitely the warmth of acceptance of no matter who you are, what your age is, what your abilities are, there's something for you to do, and you will get something back. Even if you're a quiet person, just to hear the buzz around you. It's an energy, and it's just, I think it's if it was to say, what do I get from it? It is obviously the work. I love to do the work, but I also love the community.
Well, I know with me, my children were all in school. My daughter was in grade 3 at that time. And I got this silly notion in the back of my mind that I wanted to go back to school. So I remember going into the Hub and saying to the ladies in there, I think I'm going to go back to school and get my high school certificate. Well, it was like a celebration. And they were very, very good to teach me things. I cannot spell. I have never been able to spell. I will never learn how to spell. But with the help of these ladies, I was able to complete assignments, encouragement, you can do this.
Support behind you.
100% support behind me. And two of the ladies that stick out most in my mind was Peggy Cameron and Ann Hinton. Now, Ann Hinton, being a former teacher, was really, really good. Peggy, who had raised 5-7 children at that time, very, wise woman. I would hand them a paper and say, okay, help me fix it. Don't tell me, don't do it. Just show me how to fix it. And they would sit down with me and say, tell me all the different ways and that. And I honestly have to say, I don't think I would have finished my high school or got my certificate had it not been for the encouragement of the ladies at the Hub.
I don't know, I think it just helped me, like working in the store, learning how to talk to people and communicate with other people and not be shy or feel that you were lower than other people.
Right. Yes.
We were all on an equal footing then. Didn't matter whether you came from a low income or whether you had money and had big mansions like Peggy.
Yeah.
We all felt very equal and the same.
Well, it keeps you connected. Because, as I said, I'm really into my grandchildren right now, and they take a lot of time and energy, but the Hub keeps me connected to what's happening in the community. So I go to the meetings, and then I go to my personnel committee meetings, and I hear all the news and all of what's happening and behind the scenes stuff, and it makes me still feel connected. I like that part about it.
I have two. When I became president, were just about finished a renovation to the second floor apartment. It had been dental offices, and when the dentist moved out, we hadn't been able to rent the space, so we'll make it into an apartment. We were down to no more money and not quite finished. So I went out and I got backup. Charities cannot borrow from a bank. So I went out and I needed $10,000 to finish. So I went out and got investors who would give us $1,000 and we would pay it back in a year. The thinking being if we rented the apartment, that could go into paying them back and we'd be aces. So it did indeed work out. We finished the apartment, we rented it the first month, we paid the investors back, and now it pays the maintenance on the hub building, which I think is really quite good. And the other one was getting Rebound up and running. Now, I am also the same person that has said repeatedly, ditch that thing, it costs too much money. But it is a service to the community, it does divert waste, I know all that. But it costs a lot of money to keep it going.
No, it does still.
No, I'm not being fair. It doesn't cost that much now. It did for about 5 years. It was just like having a money pit. I think now it breaks even most of the time. And the hub's standing in the back if they need us. And it has 4 part-time jobs. That's not to be sneered at. So that's 4 people who have a little change in their pocket. So I did that.
In 1975, it was International Women's Year. And I organized with a group of other women a conference for women in town. We had 170 women attend. It was a wonderful, wonderful event at the Almont High School. And so we had workshops and guest speaker, and it was a very, very exciting time. Well, I've always written plays for the hub for the various anniversaries. So I've got the scripts so they were skits. And for Interval House, I always wrote, skits and stuff for this and that. And I always write songs for people's birthdays and whatever, and change the familiar tunes and change the words. Yeah. So then I was at the textile. So for the hub's 35th, I guess I wrote Phantom of the Hubbera. And that was a little different than what I'd written for other hub plays or hub events. And it was more like a real play, and I really quite liked it. And it was a musical.
But I do put together the ads. I still do all of the social media. So I do our website. I do all the posts every single week. I do all our Facebook posts for both the Hub and Rebound. And through social media, I've been able to reach out to other organizations and them to us within the community. So Carleton Place, Perth, Smith Falls, these wonderful little towns. The Hub has made me realize you can give a whole bunch of yourself and still receive so much greatness in return, and it doesn't have to be about the dollar. That's what it boils down to.
So Julia Thomas became president when we were 25, but she could not serve her whole presidency because she was moving to, she was going to New Zealand to visit her friends. So we knew that we wanted her president so that we could say we have a recycled president and through to the festivities, that type of thing. But so once she left, then I was acting president, and then I took over as president and ran for many terms and until I was elected to town council. But it was what a great, like it was a pleasure and to be president of the hub and to work with Mary Ellen Pachunowicz, who was our treasurer, and Anne Amy, who was her assistant, but like a really good team there of keeping the hub going, and I mean we still used to write, everybody wrote their cash sheets by hand. Do you know what I mean? Like we were not high tech by any stretch of the imagination.
And I got involved when the old hub burned and we needed a place to go. So I got involved then and was able to help. I was pretty proud of that too, that I was able to help seal the deal on the building, which we bought for $1.
During like the May Day celebrations, I think possibly it was, or sometime in the summer when we did fashion shows. Using only things that were brought into the hub, and I was the commentator for that.
Most of the women who belong to the hub are really, I don't want to say tough, that isn't the image that they project, but they're strong and they're capable, and they don't ever look at anything as something that can't be done. It's not, it can't be done, it's how do you get it done?
But as long as our society is based on volunteers picking up the slack, socially, economically, a store like this is going to thrive because it's a necessary part of our total societal structure. And the economy of our society demands that these sort of places are there and are working for everybody.
I like the hub that it's so inclusive, and that there's so much about the hub. It's not just a store, and it's not just a service club, and it's not just a group of crazy women, and it's not just a welcoming place for kids. It's all of those things, and it welcomes our whole community.
It's listen to what the community requires. The community changes, it grows, it evolves, and the hub has evolved and by bringing in Rebound, an evolution there, by bringing in another area that is required of.
I've worked Thursday nights ever since I started at the hub, and I have never given that up. I love Thursday nights because of the chaos and the fact it's a bag sale. But having said that, we have regulars, and they've come to know me, I've come to know them, they know our volunteers by name, and you sort of see the impact.
In my time, there has always been a summer picnic and a Christmas party, and the Christmas party changes ever so slightly depending on who's organizing it. We used to bring a gift that went into the heap, and it had to be something from the hub that cost less than $5, and you also had to bring a donation for the food bank. And watching people open these sometimes really funny gifts was a joy.
So lots of dress up happens at the hub as adults, playing dress up. You never think it's going to be quite as fun as it actually is. Books that are, like how to be a good wife, those type of books. We always like to read out loud from those types of books. Sometimes people's recipe books, and so they're in their own handwriting, and you can spend hours, just looking at people's donations because some of them are so interesting.
I remember one time too, there was a lady volunteer working there, and when she came in, she took her sweater off and laid it on the counter.
Yes.
Type thing, eh? And at the end of her shift, she said, "Did anybody see my sweater? Well, what does it look like?" And she said, "Oh, we sold that an hour ago."
But didn't she find it 2 months later, a month later? Someone was walking down the street with it on, and she ran on, "That's my sweater, that's my sweater. Did you buy it at the hub?"
So little funny things like that happen that you can remember. Eh?
The pajama party at Peggy Cameron's house was the most fun I think we ever had at a party. We all came dressed for Christmas in our pajamas. Some of those parties were just too hilarious for words. And of course, half the fun is the picture that you get afterwards, you know, that you can go back and remember and see how funny we all looked. And other times we've all come in various costumes for reasons, and we pick a theme, and everyone was supposed to come in some kind of a related costume. And we always played really silly games. They were such fun because everybody enjoyed them, so no one got left out.
Oh, I like the part of the hub because they, how would I put it? They're not snobbish. They relate to everybody that comes in. They're interested in them, and if they can help them out, they can. When I go in there, I see the younger women that have children. They come in, they buy clothes for their children. They practically clothe their children from the hub. Then when the children grow out of clothes, they bring them back in, and somebody else can take a turn on them.
Everything in our store is donated. So our stock is here because of the generosity of the community. People buy things, and their purchases then, the money they have paid then gets returned to the community. So it's this wonderful circle, just like the wheel, just like the hub going round and round. So everything is returned to the community. Last year we gave $54,000 back. This year it's going to be closer to $60,000, and those donations go to groups, students, children, seniors. We have a sponsorship in on the Mills bus, for instance. We give donations to people going into town, into Ottawa for cancer treatments. We help people who have a fire. We help send kids to things like Reach for the Top. All kinds of things get helped through the hub.
We have records dating back to 2003, and between 2003 and today, the hub has given us almost $34,000, which is incredible. Several of the things that they've bought, chairs for our patients, are actually going in the next few days. 21 chairs for the rooms in our medical surgical unit. They've bought a chair for patients who come to us for transfusion. They've bought a bed for our bariatric patients. They've bought a treadmill for the physiotherapy department. And they've also bought a thing called an elbow walker, which is to help support people as they are walking after they've had an illness or injury that has compromised that. One of the things I've noticed about the money that they give us is that they don't focus on sort of the big and fancy pieces of equipment. Rather, they focus on things that the average patient, that the ordinary citizen will use when they come into the hospital.
I think one of the main things that I like about the hub is giving back to fire victims. When there's a major fire and they've lost everything, they can come into the hub and get what they need to help their family till they get set back up again. You know, that's one of the main.
It's that the food bank, we do a monthly donation to the food bank. We do a monthly donation to Interval House.
Okay, the Helping Hand Fund formally was inaugurated, I think, probably 18 years ago. And when they first set up the auction,
The paintings that are against the walls on both sides of the room, if they have a number, they are part of the silent auction, not the live auction. And the forms to fill out can be found at the tables with the lovely lamps at the end of each sort of row of paintings.
All of the aspects of the bridge, including a fisherman in the back corner and the Andrew Dixon building. 50 once, 50 twice, third and final, sold for $50 to Ed Clark.
Our auctions are run by another one of the hub's unsung heroes, and that's a lady named Danielle Morgan. She plans them, she puts them out, she takes stuff home, she researches over the internet to ascertain that things really are valuable.
and the money from the auction is set aside for the Helping Hand Fund. And from that, Julia and I go to the liaison committee with the Mills Community Corp, and we have that bag of money that we can put towards whatever requests for assistance have come in. And the funny secret about the hub is if we don't have enough money in our little private pot, they'll top it up for us.
And it is dedicated to helping people with medical problems through our medical transportation program for people with cancer or other very serious illnesses that require multiple trips to the city to go to medical appointments, and to families in some sort of crisis, whether they're fire victims or have a very ill family member or a child who needs special equipment and treatment.
We were very, very involved in the Mississippi Mills Liaison Committee, or the Almont Liaison Committee before Mississippi Mills, and that was really looking at the community needs and where people could work together for it to be able to help with the community. This committee started, and the fundraising started, and the hub was the banker, specifically for a man who had MS and needed a stair lift in his house. And so there was a community service clubs. We all went together, and the hub held the funds, and we called it the Hub Helping Hand. Actually, we had it open for a while, and then we said, well, let's keep this open, and so it became the Hub Helping Hand, that fund. And the people around decided to form a committee and become the liaison committee. So that was back when Karen Slater was the executive director of ACDC. And Karen Slater taught us all so much about community development and about social services.
The hub has things that you just wouldn't believe sometimes that you found this in the hub. Children's toys that are brand new for my grandchildren, that quite often a child will use a toy for 2 weeks, and then the value of that toy is done because they've either outgrown it or they've moved on to something else. So I buy it from the hub, use it until it's no longer useful for the grandchildren, return it to the hub, somebody else gets to buy it, same price. More money is circulated in the charitable community with all the good charities that the hub sponsors. That part of it I like. The part of recycling, again with books, you can't wear a book out. 1,000 people can read a book and it still looks just fine. So the more people that read the book, the less garbage goes to the landfill, and each person that reads it, if they return it to the hub after they've finished reading it, that's again recycling that, and the hub gets the money again. It's just a win-win. Going to the hub, shopping at the hub, it's one of the best places in Almont to go.
There's another funny thing that happens. We have young women, not necessarily young, come to us who have limited education, but lots and lots of raw talent. And we put them back in school and we mentor them and they go on. We've had 1, 2, 3 have gone on to be social workers themselves. And it's just wonderful to see, wonderful to see.
It's essentially a very welcoming place. It's part of the philosophy of the hub was inclusion, right from the beginning, and that focus has never changed. The hub provides a welcome to lonely people. Yeah. It provides a refuge for people who don't have very many other outlets. It also provides affordable shopping.
They brought Almont to what it is. If it hadn't been for the hub, I don't think Almont would be as good a place to live as what it is. Because they've helped out practically every organization. They've helped out the young people. They've helped out the older people. They've helped out everything that goes on around the town, the puppets and every organization that they have, the parades and everything. No, Almont is the richer for the hub. They really, really are.
For me, social media has changed how we operate our business. It's given us an opportunity to expand our audience, to communicate with people that are in Cornwall or Kingston or Toronto, and the volume of people that come through and say, oh, I'm from Petawawa, I'm from Quebec. And you sort of go, wow, like you've driven an hour, 2 hours to come to our store, and it's because they've seen something on Facebook or seen something on the website or have heard from somebody else through Facebook that we had the following auction item and it was worth the drive. So it's an eye-opener, but it also allows us to partner and build our relationships and have stronger roots within all the communities around here. So in the future, I just hope that the hub exists, whether it's a thrift store, a furniture recycling store, I don't know. But I hope it's a way for the community to get together and find a way to give back.
I've never really thought about it. I've just always assumed it will muddle along just the way it is. It's sort of the intake equals the outflow, and it will still be on the corner doing what it does.
I can't see a store like this, an association like this, ever disappearing. If it did, we would be the happiest people on earth, because it would mean that there wasn't a need for it. There will always be a need for this. And all I can see is that this store is going to get bigger and better.
It is a different generation, a completely different generation. However, the hub has attempted through social media to reach them. And we do have active Facebook. We do have a website that, unlike many websites, has changed every week, thanks to Andrea Bird. I also think, and we've tried to understand the current success of the hub. Ironically, social media and the internet, which has dealt a blow to in-person shopping at a retail level, I think has encouraged the success of the hub. And it's because of the existence of things like Kijiji and Craigslist and, Ottawa sharing or whatever. Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm not into that very much, but whole generations are into second-hand shopping. And these things, these sites have legitimized person-to-person shopping or just the idea of buying something second-hand. Mm-hmm. We've increased the base. And I think we potentially have increased the volunteer base 10, 20 years down the road. That remains to be seen, but I think that the internet has worked for us.
I'm on the board of palliative care, and the hub has been very generous in supporting palliative care.
It was needed, just like things happen. The hospice has to happen, and so the very good organisers, Eloise and Glenda, certainly put their heads together and researched and put the pieces together.
As we speak, and this being November 2013, that hospice is up and running. It's a volunteer visitor service. We have a paid coordinator. We have a board. We have established ourselves as a corporation, and we're a going concern.
I was just so thrilled when I was approached first by Glenda Jones and her team to say that they wanted to set up a hospice in this community. One of the things we talk about in healthcare is the continuum of care, and that really speaks to the fact that at different points in a particular illness or injury, people need different types of care, different levels of care. And one of the things we haven't been able to offer people in this community is really good support at home when they're dying. We provide great care for them in the hospital, but lots of people don't need to be in the hospital and don't want to be in the hospital. And with the formation of the Hub Hospice, and the training of volunteers by that group to support people in their homes, we are able to work together to make sure that our patients and residents have that kind of opportunity, that kind of care, and the ability to stay at home.
There was a man named Mark Stevens who had a very serious neurological illness and lived as a resident of the chronic care wing of the hospital for probably the last 5 years of his life. And he had an electric wheelchair and loved to get outside, as you could imagine. And he would wheel himself down to where the outlook is, look across to the fairgrounds.
And he would sit there in his wheelchair, and he was a very gregarious person. He loved being around people. So he would almost sort of time it to the end of the day when the high school students and public school kids would be coming by, and many of them would stop and chat with him. And so over time, over the next couple of years, he got a bit emboldened, and instead of being by the curb, he would make his way more into the middle. Well, there were certain people who, poor Julia Thomas used to think that when she came around that corner, she was going to take Mark out.
So our dear wonderful Julia said, we need to fix this. And with lots of encouragement, lots
Fundraisers
of... And they got in, you know, architects, and they got in building people, and they got the codes all done. And finally, there is a wheelchair accessible lookout, like a deck that people can go out into their wheelchair and look at the Mississippi River in Elmont.
And then Mark died before it was realized. And when we were trying to come up with the name, and I got to remember how this was, it ended up being Mark's Outlook. But originally it was going to be Mark's Lookout. But then I have malaprop problems. So I said Mark's Outlook. And then Julia went, that's perfect, because it's all about his outlook. So that's how the name came to be. And it was, for the girls and I, it was just, you know, just wonderful. And then when the big stone and the plaque went up about how Mark used to look out at the river, and that was his favorite place to be, it was just wonderful. It's what makes Elmont such a nice place to live.
Originally, the hub was centered on improvement of the lives of women and children, and particularly women and children at risk. And if you follow it down through the years, the projects have become, I think, less individual and more community focused, but they remain the same. So it's our community, what is needed in our community, and how can we best address that need.
When I first started, it was on the old hub, and when people would bring in stuff, we didn't have that many donations then, so as they brought it in, we used to sort it and put it out. But then it got to the point that there's so many donations that you just couldn't sort them while you were also at the cash register. So I just stayed behind the cash register pretty well and answered any questions that people had. We had the little room off the main room, and we used to have a coffee pot in there all the time, and a lot of them that maybe were on welfare or living by themselves or so on, they would come in and just for somebody to talk to. And we always tried to be a listening ear if we could. Well, it's getting more complicated now, because I guess life is more complicated. Like, at first it was very simple. You see the people and you'd help them. But now, I don't know, everything is getting so, just to say complicated, because you have to look at in a broader sense how you can help people.
It feels sometimes more like a business than a living room that you go into. But once you stay there for a little while, you realize it is just a more formal living room than it used to be, or a more formal kitchen table, because the same rules apply that applied 40 years ago when people started. That we're there for each other, we're there to help a community, we're there for the same goals and purposes are still there. So it feels different, but I don't think it actually is different.
I hear stories from the ladies of how it was, they were all these young moms and they were coming with their armloads of babies, which cracks me up because it's true. You see the pictures and you go, wow, it looks like the hub was almost a daycare, which is kind of cool because these women could get together, have conversations, swap clothing, and sort of benefit each other. And I think they're sort of, this really strong network of really strong women. And to me, that sort of changed over the years because we've almost become a true store. And so I know it upsets some of our original volunteers because they're like, oh, it's changed so much. But in the same token, you have to embrace that change because that's how our society is changing and how our community needs us to be. You have to adapt to what the community needs.
In the 40 years of the hub, I think there have been 3 very definitive events. The first one was the establishment of Interval House. That was a major accomplishment. The second was another recent major accomplishment, and that was the establishment of the Hub Hospice Palliative Care. They were both positive. The third was a huge negative. The fire in 1998.
The sad thing that happened while I was mayor was the burning of the hub at that point, and that was a disaster.
It was the night of Light Up the Night, and it was a confusion as far as the fire brigade. The call went in and they said it was the hub, and there was a hub in Carlton Place. There were new windows put in upstairs where all they had to do was push out. It was a tragedy because it shouldn't have happened.
It was just people that were minding their own business, and it was a horrible time for us. Yeah. Not only, the hub was secondary. The hub was not, we didn't lose the hub, we have the hub. The hub was the people. The building was, the secondary part of the hub, but Andrea and Bill were not secondary.
The change of venue happened. I remember that well. Now, Dorothy Finner came through. She must have challenged the bank, the Royal Bank, to give us their building.
After the fire, where were they going to go? In the meantime, our business park, we had Gord Pike bringing in the big food store, and I met with him one day, and I always laugh the way Gord does things. But anyway, he said, I'd like you to come and have lunch. He said, we'll have some people from the Royal Bank. And the Royal Bank was here downtown at that time. Little did I know that they were going to be going out to the business park. So in the meantime, this building was going to be vacant. And so I was speaking with the hub people, and I said, let's see if we can get that building for the hub. So I met with them, and we got it. Now, mind you, the hub did all of the legal work and everything else. It was just a matter of can we get this, and how do we go about it, sort of thing. So
So we fundraised the money, and it was it wasn't actually difficult to fundraise. One of our biggest donors, and their last, the last little piece that got us through was Peggy Cameron, who was one of our really good members.
But I have to tell you, I think this should go in here. After we were allowed to go back into the building when the fire was, everything was out, and we were allowed to go back in, we used to have a little wooden box behind the cash. Little wooden box. And that's where we used to put our nightly deposits in. So at the end of the shift, the ladies would count out the money and drop it in this little wooden box. That wooden box survived the fire. That back area, that back wall was all burnt to char. But here's this little wooden box. I remember going in with my husband, Stan, and we took the box off the counter. We had permission to do this. And we ended up taking it home. And when he unlocked the little lock, the money was still there. It hadn't gotten burnt. So here we had in our house all these bills, soaking wet, smelling of smoke, drying out on our countertop. But why did that money survive? I asked myself that.
It's a sign to keep going, eh?
Hundreds of times. Okay. First thing we had to do was take down all the counters. Because it's,
where
when
the teller
you
stood.
Walked into the bank, there was the big long shelving or countertop where all the tellers were, and on the left-hand side there were all the little rooms where the different people had their offices, like finances and yeah. So we had to take them all down. That was the big job. It wasn't a hard job, but it was a big job. Threw on a bit of paint. Had to go looking at high and there and everywhere for racks, because we had no racks to hang our clothing on. We were able to get them. So we started out with just racks, and then we eventually built shelving and units and that along the walls.
Well, I will say what I bet you almost everybody says, Julia Thomas.
Julia Thomas, who is an innovator and an idea person. She sparks all of us.
Julia's not an imperious or bossy person at all. She's charismatic. She has the ability to make people believe in her and what she wants.
Oh, the person I think that really brought the hub is Julia Thomas. She is amazing. And we have some wonderful workers there. Like Glenda Jones is another one, and Mary Lou Thuder, she's another one. And Fern Martin has always been involved with it too. Jane Torrance is another one, because she was involved the time of the fire, the first hub was burnt. And Jane really, if it hadn't been for her, I don't think we would have ever recuperated. And, what's her name now? She lives on the island.
The people that stand out from my very early days at the hub were Jenny Doyle, who's just always been such a cheerleader for the hub, and such a beautiful, beautiful person and soul, and loves to be inclusive of everyone. And so for sure, Jenny Doyle. Fern Martin, who's just the heart and soul of half the hub, and housed us for so many years in her building, and she's such a great person. But I used to always say when I grew up, I wanted to be Janet Duncan, and that was because she was my role model,
Irene Faith was a lovely British war bride.
Peggy Cameron was the president. The president, she put into effect the rule that the president had to clean the toilet. So So it was Peggy that had said, if you're president, that's your job. And I thought it was, like an excellent job. You don't get too uppity because you're president. You still have to clean the toilet. And we had our Christmas parties at Peggy's house for years and years. It was such a fun time to go there because it's such a beautiful house, But when Peggy died, it was at the same time, and she left us some money in her will.
Who else can I think of that is an unsung hero? Danielle Morgan, who has been doing our Helping Hand Fund. She runs our household department and does a monthly auction.
Well, we're very proud of Fern. She has a wide variety of gifts. Janet Duncan, she was fully involved with us early days. We have Mary Lou Suter, is wonderful and has fully up to her neck in doing everything for the town and for the hub as treasurer at the moment. She's been president. Eloise Caverson, we didn't, she was drawn into the hub when she first came, president, and of course involved in the stages of the hospice and has gone on to be on the board, and she's very busy. Mary Ellen Petrunowicz, she was working full-time but was the treasurer for years. And Glenda was a great writer and does a wonderful media job, and so we've got the sales.
Glenda is one of the people that I really admire. She's very friendly. She knows all the information that you want to know about the hub, and
Elizabeth Dunning, these are part of the old crew, and Elizabeth was just that steady rock that was there all the time. I think the hub is becoming under Andrea, a much better communicator than it ever was before, and starting to communicate things that it's involved in and that the town is involved in is a good thing. She's got such great ideas, and she will be the one who takes it forward. I think she's one of my favorite presidents.
One of the people I admire the most is Nancy Hall. Nancy is one of the most loyal, hardworking, generous, open, honest, trustworthy people I have ever met in my life. It's a cliche to say somebody is a rock, but Nancy Hall is one of the foundations of the hub. Even though she wasn't there for the first 8 years, in the last 30 years, we depend so much upon Nancy.
One thing that's kind of interesting, all of our staff in the store are volunteers, and the shifts change morning and afternoon every day. So we have customers who come in on a day because they know that's when their favorite volunteers are there. People who come and shop may come for a year and then say, I'd really like to work here. And right then the volunteer book is just slapped on the counter and their name is signed up. Everybody has a talent. So what we want to do is find your talent and find what you can do that's going to make you feel good and us look better. So if someone comes in and says, I really can't do very much, but I could sort the yarn, there, you just got yourself a job. So there's something for everyone.
if I don't go for a day or two, which has happened from time to time, the colds or the flu, you don't want to give that to other people. And when they do see me, they come over and ask, has there been something wrong? Like they're concerned, like, has something happened? We haven't seen you in a couple of days. Are you okay? Again, that's nice to have people notice that you're there and then notice that you're not there.
I'm Elizabeth Dunning, and I've been with the Hub for 35 years. I started out in the old building when my youngest was just a rug rat, and she's 37 now, so I know it's at least 35 years. And quite a while I've been in charge of the book room. I have a wonderful crew, and most Mondays we're tripping over each other here. And as you saw, we get a lot of books in.
These are the children's books, yes. Science, nature, large books, and then we have the toddler preschooler, and then we have the young infant books, and then we have the early reading. These are all activity books, learning, numbers, math, and they're all free for parents. So it's terrific.
What I like in a good volunteer, I like them to be compassionate. I like them to be non-judgmental, and that's the hardest one. Doesn't matter what comes through that door, that's a person who needs you, and they need to be treated with respect, and they need to know that you do respect their humanity, not necessarily how they live, but just that they are people.
Well, I come Monday morning, and then I come Wednesday morning and run the cash, and then Friday afternoon I come in for about 2 hours. So I get to know everybody in town.
I've been a volunteer here since, I think, the second or first week in December, and it's a really nice place to volunteer. The ladies here are very nice. They may talk and they may giggle, but you know what? While all that is going on, they're working.
Sorting boxes, and then I look at what's coming out and I assess the condition, and usually they're in, we have to have stuff we can sell pretty quickly. So some things are collectibles, which we will put aside for our silent auction, which we call them auction worthy. But right now I don't really see much of the stuff that's coming that's really auction worthy, as people that have given away plates and whatnot. So we would try to put them out at the best price so that they could get on the shelves quickly and then be sold quickly.
Hi, my name is Maria Murphy, and I am the volunteer store manager at the Hub and Rebound. And I took over the Rebound position last summer, and I'm absolutely delighted to be part of having instigated or helped with this move to a new, bright, beautiful location.
We've had actual generations of people. We've had Nancy Hall come with her daughter April. April has come with her children. And when the children come into work, the moms just don't let them go loose and play. Those kids work, and they like to do it. They like it. It's a discipline, and they enjoy it. So we know that what we're instilling in generations here is getting passed on, again, for the good of the community.
I love it.
Everything in our store is donated. So our stock is here because of the generosity of the community. People buy things, and their purchases then, the money they have paid then gets returned to the community. So it's this wonderful circle, just like the wheel, just like the Hub, going round and round.
Well, you want to know what if you think about what the Hub is and the Hub logo, I used to always think of it as something, a wraparound of the people inside, and the little spokes of people coming into that hub. But I don't think about that so much anymore. I think of it as a moving target, like it rolls and it keeps moving forward. And those people, it's, if you can think about the little spokes as times of your life when you enter the hub, and so you become a spoke rather than the hub. The hub, and anyway, the Hub just serves so many functions for so many people, and you serve so many functions for the Hub, as a person, and every person has a part of that, and it's always moving. So I think it's a little bit of a symbol that can last us for a long time.